Hello, everyone, and welcome to this morning's session. Keep your family safe online. I'm so excited to be here with you this morning. Welcome. I hope you're having a lovely Friday so far. Can't believe it's Friday already. My name's Kirsty. I'm a trainer for Google's free skills training program, Google Digital Garage. I've been working in this industry now for around 7 years, and I absolutely love helping people discover things about the online world that can be really useful either within their business or within their day-to-day life. So this session today falls into that second option of helping you really start to understand some of the things that you can put in place to mitigate some of the risks that our children are facing, how we can deal proactively with these challenges. But I am not here alone. In the chat, we have the lovely Samantha. So I'm sure some of you have already seen a hello in the chat from Samantha. Samantha's going to be our moderator today. She's also a super experienced Google Digital Garage coach and mentor. So please do go over to that chat, say hello, introduce yourself, let us know why you've signed in today, because this is a little bit different to our usual sessions that we run in regards to digital marketing. So let us know, what is it that's really drawn you to today's session? Are you a parent? Are you a guardian? Are you a teacher? You know, is there something that you do in your day-to-day life that you think this is going to be really, really relevant for? While you say hello, I'm going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, if you do have any trouble hearing or seeing this webinar, please do try refreshing your browser. Hopefully that will help any technical issues that are going on in the system, and you'll be able to see and hear us. If you are wondering about that instant chat that I just mentioned and you're thinking, I want to chat to Samantha, but I don't know how, to the right of this video, if you're on a computer, there should be a chat where you should be able to say hello, ask questions, save any links that Samantha posts throughout the session. But you will need to make sure that you're signed into your YouTube account in order to chat with us today. I will be pausing throughout to answer any questions that have come up in that chat box, but also Samantha will be sharing links and answering questions as we go as well. So you've got the two of us here. Finally, this is not a standalone session. I'm sure if you've been here before, you know Google Digital Garage has a huge virtual training plan, and this is part of a broader offering. So please do head over to the Google Digital Garage site and check out the upcoming schedule. See if there's anything that you're interested in attending another time. So that's the housekeeping. This session today, as you can see, we've got two logos along the bottom of the screen. So Keep Your Family Safe Online is a Google Digital Garage program that was developed with someone called internetmatters.org. Now, internetmatters.org are a non-for-profit organisation, and they have a simple purpose. They want to empower parents and carers to keep children safe in the digital world. So with Google's understanding of tech and Internet Matters expertise and focus on guiding parents through some of these issues that we can all experience when it comes to using the internet, they've come together to create and deliver this course. So today we're going to start to work through some of the ideas around web safety, what that means for your family, what that means for you, and also hoping to leave you with the feeling of being more confident about your family being online while staying safe and while staying secure. So this session is actually aimed at a real broad amount of people. Anyone who's interested in keeping the children in their life safe when they're online. So I might say parents a few times during the session, but when I say parents as a reference to adults, I mean anyone who has a child in their life that they want to keep safe online. It can be uncles, aunties, grandparents, sisters, brothers, teachers, anyone who feels that they could effectively, proactively challenge some of the things that we face online. So we're going to break this session into 3 clear sections. The first one is thinking about understanding online safety, actually discussing the power of the internet and some of those key areas of concerns when it comes to adults with different children in their life. The second part is going to be all about keeping our children safe. So we're going to dive into some specific risks and the actions that we can take to combat those risks. And then the final part, want to boost some attitudes towards safety. So we want to start thinking about how we can encourage that conversation with the children in our lives. It's not about shutting it down and banning the phones and grounding them, but how can we create that conversation? We've got some tools to leave you with at the end of today's session. So thinking about the first part, thinking about what is online safety, what does that mean to us, and what are some of the key concerns that we have as adults, as parents, as carers in the digital age. I mean, there's a lot of kids now growing up where they do not know a time where they couldn't connect to the entire world on a device that they could hold in their hands. That's amazing, right? That's incredible that there are children now who do not know a world without a device that's internet enabled. It's mind-blowing. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Now in the chat or in front of you, if you're not quite brave enough to get in the chat yet, think about some of the biggest concerns that you face in keeping your children safe online. And tell Samantha and I in the chat, are there any things that really stick out to you that you have definitely faced or you've heard when you've talked to other carers, other parents? Oh yeah, they're experiencing that as well. Put it in the chat and I'll come back to that in a second if there's any comments. And I can see Rizal from the Philippines. Hello, Rizal from the Philippines, and you're a guardian. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today. Wow, we're global. We're going global. So if there's any concerns that you feel are definitely reasons, maybe it's a reason why you're here today. Maybe it's a reason that really spurred you on to book in and come live to the session this morning. Often we get things like screen time, controlling the types of content that they see, gaming, so games that are maybe at an inappropriate age level for the children in your care. Any other concerns, do put them in the chat and I will come back and read them. But these are some real quotes from a recent focus group with parents, and they really do start to demonstrate some of the specific issues that parents and carers are facing. So if any of you read these, I'm going to read a couple out, and you think, yes, that's how I feel, you're not alone. There's other parents that are sharing the same worries, the same fears, and they're searching for help. Parents, so starting from the top left, parents need to be more involved, engaged, and educated. My children are more tech savvy than I am. Definitely a common phrase that I hear from a lot of adults and parents. The blue top right there, safety is paramount. I'm concerned with what they get up to when I'm not monitoring them. Absolutely. Bottom left, this is the era of technology and kids don't play outside anymore. Anyone heard that? I feel like I'm getting to the age where I've definitely said that a few times myself, like, oh, kids don't go outside. I was always climbing trees when I was a kid. That makes me feel very old. People can pretend to be anyone online. A real concern, right? The fact that you can pretend to be absolutely anyone online opens so many different types of concerns. And the final one there, I don't want them stumbling across things that they shouldn't be stumbling across. So there's so many concerns out there. And hopefully we're going to start throughout this session to offer you some tips on how you can positively approach these. Because the internet's massive. It's huge. And some parents or guardians might approach these concerns by restricting access, limiting access to the internet. But again, in a world that's fastly becoming more and more and more digital, is that the best approach? Or is there a way that we can open the conversation around some of these key concerns? Roselle, cyber predators and cyber bullying. Yeah, and that really links into that yellow one, right? People can pretend to be anyone online. Yeah, nice. Thanks for getting involved. So the internet is a massive place and it's becoming part of everyday life. Think about 10 years ago, how you used your mobile phone to how you've used it already today. That's changed a lot, right? In the past 10 years. So 81% of 12 to 15-year-olds use a smartphone to go online. 67% of 8 to 11-year-olds play games online. And 73% of 5 to 7-year-olds use a tablet to go online. Ask yourself, how old were you when you got your hands on the type of technology that 5 to 7-year-olds are using already, like part of normal everyday life? When you actually put that into perspective, it's amazing, right? And things are moving quickly. There's a huge pace when it comes to tech. So start to think about, okay, if you're someone here that maybe has a tendency to limit access to tech, it's a fear thing, absolutely. You know, with our children, we want to keep them safe. But remember that tech can also be an amazing force for good. It can be great. It gives us access to a wealth of information that we'd never be able to find as easily, which means we're opening doors for learning, for homework. There's loads of interactive tools or games that we can use to aid that learning. And some of these games can be done with parents, so we can do that together. There's this freedom of expression that exists in the online world. It allows our young people to find a voice, to find role models. So they might start a blog, they might start following their favorite artists, their favorite singers, their favorite whatever it is. And the internet can be an amazing place for young, aspiring creatives to start getting started. But it does remain a complex place. And we have to remember that the internet was not built intentionally for children. So it's not as regulated as other children's services. So what we can start to frame tech as is an enabler. It's an enabler that can be an amazing force for learning, for aiding more learning, for finding out information, for having an expression, for discovering something we never could have discovered in everyday life. But with great power comes great responsibility. So we need to start to understand how we're using it. So again, come to your notepad in front of you, piece of paper, or in the chat. What do your children actually do online? What do they do online? Tell me in the chat. And this is always a really interesting question when you ask parents. Because they're like gaming, or I don't know, downloading stuff. If you'd have asked my mum when I was a kid, she probably would have said chatting to her school friends that she'd seen all day. So think about it. What are they doing online? Nice, I can see Roselle there watching videos. Absolutely. Huge, right? Watching videos. And start to take that further. Do you feel like you can monitor what they're doing? Do you feel that you have a complete handle on what they're doing? And again, Roselle, playing mobile app games. Yes, right? So it's really clear when we start to talk about these things that our children today are growing up in a world that's very different compared to maybe the world I grew up in when I was younger. And many of us will have a firm grip on what our children are doing online, but there's loads of examples of what they potentially could be doing. Some stats around how children are using the internet. 26 times a day is how often the average child between 11 and 16 posts on social media. 26 times a day. That's a lot, isn't it? 62% of children aged 11 and 12 have a social media profile despite the minimum age actually being 13. And a third of children play online against people they've never met in person. So if any of you have children that are playing games like Fortnite, so it's really important that we get involved. We understand what they're doing, we can guide them through it safely. And then most importantly, we open the conversation, we create that safe space, which is what I want to talk about next, where if something happens that impacts our children, they know they can come to us. We've opened that communication line so that we can have that conversation and we can move them past anything inappropriate. Which brings me to my first pausing for questions. I can't see any questions so far. So we're going to move into part 2 of today's session. And we're going to keep this pace going because part 2 is really full. And there's a lot that I want to get through. So we're starting to think now. We've introduced the power, what our kids are doing, and some of the risks. But what I want to start to do is start to think about how we can keep our children safe online. I want to define 6 core risks that really come up very regularly when we're talking to parents. We want to address those concerns and then start to look at some practical steps and some tools in some cases that you can use to move forward. So the 6 core risks that I'm going to walk through step by step, and some of them have already been mentioned in the chat, so I'm glad because we're going to tackle some of those. We've got screen time or wellness, cyberbullying, online grooming, phishing, inappropriate content, and scams. And I'm going to go through each of these step by step. So let's jump straight in to the first of the risks, which is all about screen time and wellness. Now, screen time, as we said, tech can be a power for good. So screen time can offer your children opportunities to learn new skills really very quickly, right there in front of them. And it potentially can be a great power for them on that learning journey. But too much screen time, as we all know, potentially can have a negative effect on their well-being. And we're all aware of the pros and cons of engaging through a device, and especially in a post-COVID world. You know, if it wasn't for these devices, there would have been a lot of children that weren't able to have some of those learning experiences. So we're all aware of the pros and cons. But when we start to think about too much screen time, well, it can actually impact our sleep. Sleep cycles can be affected by that blue light that comes from our screens. So that blue light tricks your brain into thinking that it's still daylight, and then it makes it difficult to sleep. So screens before bed, maybe not a great idea. It can impact our behavior. We're creatures of habit. Humans are creatures of habit. So it doesn't take long to get used to checking your phone, pressing the button up to 150 times a day. Like, oh, what time is it? Oh, I don't even know why I'm pressing it, but I'm just going to press it anyway. And it can also affect brain development. Screen-based entertainment increases central nervous system arousal, which can actually amplify anxiety. And it's really interesting because I'm a millennial, and there's loads of statistics around this, and that millennials are actually more forgetful than OAPs. And the reason for that is because we've outsourced some of our memory, well, a lot of our memory, to Google, to sat navs, to calendars. So when it comes to anything we know we can just find really easily, we don't remember it. It's really interesting how our habits around this tech has meant that our memory is less for some of these key life things. 50% of primary school age pupils take an internet-enabled device to bed with them. So when we're starting to think impacting our sleep and our behaviour and our brain development, and 50% of primary school age children are taking it to bed with them, how can we start to proactively deal with this? Now, I said in a post-COVID world, we are still seeing the effects of lockdown. We're still seeing it. You know, we're 2 years later, but we are starting to see that lockdown led naturally to higher screen time for a lot of families, not just children, for all of us, between socializing, schooling, exercise, entertainment. We all increased whatever was normal pre-lockdown when it came to our screen time. But you know what? Not all screen time is created equal. And it's all about thinking about this balanced digital diet. So we talk about balanced diets, but a balanced digital diet. And something that encourages creativity, learning, connection with family and friends. So using the internet with purpose. So it's really important that we start to think, right, not all screen time is equal. So giving a deadline of, oh, you can have it for 1 hour after school a day, which, you know, when we're thinking about general screen time, we might think, right, 1 hour. But actually, is it 1 hour of gaming, 1 hour of watching videos that are not educational, they're more entertaining, versus research, homework, I don't know, extracurricular Zoom lessons? So it's very, very different, you know? So what we're starting to think about is finding balance between the quality time and the quantity of that time we spend. Staying safe, of course, is paramount, and creating that family harmony around the time that we spend online. Now, for those of you that have younger children in your care, there's a great tool here, and I'm sure Sam will post this link to this tool in the chat for you, called the Google Family Link. And this is where you can actually link this to your child's device. It can be locked at different times of the day. So for example, at bedtime, you can set a bedtime routine with Google Family Link, and it will lock your child's phone when they're meant to be asleep. You can temporarily lock devices with a touch of a button, so it doesn't have to be on a set timer. It can be sort of there and then when it's time to focus on a particular activity. So it could be for their homework, it could be for dinner time. You want everyone off their phones. So you can start to there and then, straight away, immediately lock some of those devices. But you might decide that the right amount of screen time for your child is depending on what they're doing that day. What are they watching? What are they playing? What are they learning? And then you can utilize Google Family Link to look at activity reports. So you can start to have a look, okay, but what apps are they using the most? Do we need to think about maybe reducing time on certain apps and encouraging more time on others? And you can also set screen time limits. So this is a great tool if you feel like you'd like them to have more control over things like an in-game experience. So that's the Google Family Link tool. Really nice tool that you can implement straight away. It's completely free to use. But there's also a secondary tool that you can use called the Forest app, which is actually one of my favourite apps. And I actually have a friend who uses this in a nice competitive way. She's got 2 boys. And what she'll do is, right, it's time for bed. And we're going to set our timer on Forest. And they've both got their iPads, and they're about 8. And they'll decide on how long they want to get ready for bed. So or the brushing the teeth and have a wash and all of that stuff. And they'll both say 1, 2, 3 and press go. And what happens with Forest app is, so you set the time, so you can see here it's been set to count down from an hour. And as you are using that time, as long as you don't touch your phone or open an app or leave the Forest app, your tree in the middle will continue to grow. But if you touch your phone and leave that screen, your tree will die. So my friend has a competition with her boys of who can grow the most trees over a month. And then they have like this kind of chalkboard in their playroom with the prizes for the different amount of trees that they grow over a month. So it's an incredibly competitive but great way to build that right attitude towards certain parts of using their devices, and brings it fun, right? You know, the whole family can have it on their own device and you can have little mini competitions as you go along. So the longer you stay off your device, the more trees you grow. Now there's a free version of this app, which is fantastic. And there's also a paid for version as well. So go and have a look at that and see if it's suitable for you. So to finish up screen time, top tips that we can start to manage that. First one, which is so important, be the role model. Whatever behavior with devices you want your children to have, set the example and role model those behaviors yourself. That's one of the best ways to really build that into your day-to-day routine with your children. Encourage them to take up alternative activities. It could be, you know, picking up their favorite book, subscribing to a magazine, getting outside, visiting a friend, anything. Getting the whole family involved in unplugging and playing. You know, do you have any board games that you like? Jigsaws? I mean, me and my family at Christmas and New Year, we still do a jigsaw every year together. And it's lovely. We put some music on in the background and the 4 of us sit there, and every year we try and complete a massive, like I'm talking no less than 1,000 pieces, jigsaws together. So can you find what's your version of unplug and play? Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's going to the park, whatever it is. Agree on the access time. Talk. What do you think is the appropriate length of time that they can use their device? And again, just like my friend with her 2 boys, can you create some kind of reward system if they choose other things other than watching videos on their phone? So encourage that critical thinking. Ask them, how long do you think you should be spending on the tablet after school? Think of all the other things that we want to do. Let's make a timeline. So depending on how old your child is, there's different approaches that you might want to take. So although managing screen time is really important, focusing on the type of activities that children are doing online, that's the most important thing. So always come back to, not all screen time is equal. What are they actually doing? And it's not always, I mean, loads of experts suggest that we should focus more on what the children are doing online and less on how long they're online for. Next, inappropriate content. Sometimes your child may stumble on something that's unsuitable for them. It might be through apps they've downloaded. It could be a link that a friend has sent them. It could be that they've chatted to other people online. Anything. It could be anything. So there's different types of content that your child might come across that might be inappropriate content. Could be pornographic material. Could be a site encouraging things like crime, racism, eating disorders, even suicide. Images of violence or cruelty. Content that contains swearing, unmoderated chat rooms, or things like gambling sites could be in that inappropriate content section. So depending on the age the maturity level of the child that's in your care. It's going to depend on their exposure or the reaction to the exposure of inappropriate content. And it can be really difficult to monitor what our child is viewing as they start to access material on any internet-enabled device. So it could be phones, tablets, computers. And we all know that when we're children, our curiosity definitely can get the better of us. But there's a few different programs that are out there that are raising the awareness of this. So some tips. Have a family agreement. This is a great place to start because you can start to, again, create that safe space where you have conversations about boundaries. You really start to think about how you can help your child critically assess what they're doing rather than just mindlessly clicking on anything when they've got that internet-enabled device in front of them. So step one is to start a conversation. As soon as your child is using the internet, start to talk about everything they might find there regularly. Help them understand that sometimes they might come across things that you as their parent or guardian would prefer them not to see, or maybe they might come across things that upset them. And that if they do, they can come and talk to you about it. The next thing that we want to really enforce is the think before you click. Starting to help our children understand that clicking on pop-ups or links or emails from people we don't really know, and this idea of if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So starting to teach them to ignore those pop-ups and come to us when there's something on their screen they don't know about, so that you can handle that threat of inappropriate content. And of course, supervise if you can and when you can. Now, this is going to be more ideal for the younger children, but even with, young teenagers, can you try and be in the same room as your child when they're online? You can just keep an eye on not necessarily the screen, but also their body language. What do they look like? Has their demeanor changed as they've been scrolling through something? And don't forget to celebrate the wins. When you observe your child doing something really positive and being what we call a digital leader, praise them for it. And if they're older, take time to convince and have the conversation with those older children that you respect their privacy while still monitoring what they're doing online. It's not about secretly checking their devices, but again, it's about opening that conversation. Now, there are, again, tools available across devices that you can make use of. The first are tools that are on the smartphones themselves. Again, older children might figure this out and kind of get into the controls and turn them off, but it's still there. There are pre-installed parental controls available for most devices, and they have different types of functions. So there's screen time, there's different apps and games you can turn the kind of the gate on so that they can't download something that's potentially for an age above. You can start to, and you can see there it says apps and games allow all, including unrated, so you can set that to only allow rated. Movies, again, TV, books, you can tick to restrict sexually explicit books. Music, restrict music marketed with explicit language. So you can really dive in to the parental controls on those devices. So there's an option that you've got. But you can also do this at broadband level. So there's a lot of parental controls on offer at broadband level, and you don't have to have them set for everything all the time. What you can do is you can actually set parental controls at broadband level for specific devices or for specific times of the day. So that's an option that you potentially have. Speak to your broadband provider and see what options they have. And you've also got something called Google Safe Search. So if someone is using a computer and they're using Chrome, you can use Google Safe Search. So maybe they're using a browser you can type in Google Safe Search, and on certain websites and internet platforms, so Google, any sort of specific apps that are linked into this tool, you can make sure that you switch on that family friendly filter. So it will block any unsuitable content for children. So there's no flawless systems. It's a case of trying a few different ones that might work and starting to think about what works best for the age of the children that you've got and the types of things that they're doing online. If you've got younger children, again, you've also got things like YouTube for Kids. So that's a specialist video app that's tailored towards children. So it's the first Google product that's built from the ground up, that's all about kids, all about families. And it offers a more contained version of a YouTube experience just for kids. So it's still generated by YouTube creators, but it uses the power of Google systems to start to filter out content that's not appropriate for our children. So there's a lot of tools for this inappropriate content. Now there's a link there that I'm sure again Samantha can share for you, internetmatters.org/parental-controls. But a bit of a resources and tools recap. Check your child's smartphone settings. That could be the first step, the basic step for you to get going with. Use those parental controls on your home broadband network. Again, amazing. And look at things like Google Safe Search and look at the settings and have a look at those family-friendly filters for certain websites. Sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Couldn't stop all three of those sneezes coming there. So start to think about the tools and resources that you can implement in order for you to mitigate some of the challenges around inappropriate content. Cyberbullying, our third topic to cover when it comes to keeping our family safe online. We all know that bullying can make people feel helpless no matter what age you are. But there's a huge difference to how bullying has changed. Face-to-face bullying, smaller audience, it's within that close quarters, it's limited within the view of what actually happens, and the bully can be identified in person. It's easier to prove this person did this, there's witnesses, and that bully can be punished. However, with cyberbullying, it's differing from traditional bullying. It doesn't just take place at school or in the street, and it has a huge audience. We can reach a vast audience in a matter of seconds. Hurtful comments and images can be shared on multiple times. It offers a degree of anonymity to the perpetrator. It can really, like we said, people can be anyone. And it can be difficult to police and difficult to punish. It can start to encroach into the home. Children spend time online using their phones, their computers, their tablets. And it can sometimes also be an extension to what they're having in the street, at school, in a face-to-face environment. So this new form of bullying that parents might not be familiar with is one of the biggest differences between cyberbullying face-to-face is that it's hard to get away from. And you can be bullied anywhere and anytime. So what to look out for? And the stat there, a really sobering stat, 1 in 8 12 to 15-year-olds say that they have been bullied on social media. So what do we want to look out for? Well, have your children, especially if they're teenagers, have they stopped using their devices really suddenly or unexpectedly? Are they seeming a bit nervous or jumpy when they're using their devices? Or have they become super obsessive over checking certain things? Are they reluctant to go to school or take part in social activities that they would usually take part in? So we can start to look at the behaviour of our children and start to see, has that started to change? Is there a way we can open this conversation? So there's different types of cyberbullying to make it more complicated. We'll hear different words used when it comes to this umbrella term, cyberbullying. So we've got harassment. That's where we target an individual or group with persistent and offensive messages. And that can develop into what we call cyber stalking as well. We've got outing, so publicly sharing personal information, private or embarrassing information, photos, videos about someone online without their permission. We've got trolling, so deliberately posting provocative or insulting messages about sensitive subjects, or things like inflicting racism, misogyny to a specific individual online. Catfishing, stealing someone's profile or setting up fake profiles to lure people into starting that online relationship with that profile. Roasting, ganging up on an individual online and sending offensive abuse until the victim is seen to crack. And griefing. This is where we're abusing and angering people, and usually you'll hear the word griefing when it comes to online gaming. So what we can start to think about, if our child has been affected or we think they're being affected by cyberbullying, there's loads of places that we can go to for help and advice, but we can also start to think of the do's and the don'ts. The do's, we want to find out why. Try and establish the facts and keep an open mind. We want to talk it through. We want to talk about that blurred line between uploading and sharing content because it's funny and it'll get loads of likes versus the potential to actually cause hurt or offense. Again, we want to teach by example. We want to model and encourage that positive behavior. If we see that our child is doing great things online, we want to praise them so they take that on board. Learn from it. Above all, we want to help our child learn from what's happened. Think about what our family could be sharing or what our family could be learning and how we can talk about that with other parents and carers. The don'ts, we don't want to get upset. We want to stay calm when we're discussing it. And then we can talk to other adults and work through our emotions with the adults. We don't want to ignore it. We want to take that situation seriously and not necessarily just blame someone else. We don't want to condone it. If your child then cyberbullies in retaliation, we need to make sure that they know that two wrongs don't make a right. And don't take away their devices. This could actually make the situation worse or could encourage them to go and find other ways to get online. So it's really important to mention that nobody likes to think that their own child could actually be a cyberbully. But young people can sometimes be drawn into behaviour without actually realising the impact of their actions. The next threat, online grooming. Sometimes known as grooming. You know, that word grooming has often been used to describe people befriending children in order to take advantage of them for sexual purposes. And this can be a really tricky area to speak to your children about. What to look out for? Being secretive about who they're talking to online might be an indication. Using sexual language that you wouldn't expect them to know. Switching screens. So again, that monitoring thing. Do they suddenly switch screens when you come into the room? 40% of children remove privacy settings on social media to attract more friends or followers. So it's an innocent act. So it's a case of, again, starting to think about how we can open the conversation, and it can be a tricky subject to talk about. If you feel uncomfortable doing this, a good way in is to say that you've maybe read a story about this happening and ask them, oh, do you know any friends that have had this happen to them? Talk about the risk. Make sure your child knows that not everyone online is who they say they are. And make sure that they know they can come to you if anyone they don't know asks to be friends with them. Agree the rules. Tell your child they shouldn't share personal information about themselves to a stranger online. They must never share pictures of their body online. And they mustn't meet up with anyone that they haven't met online. And stay engaged. So from time to time, review what they're doing on their social media together. Maybe you or a family member can be their friend on their social media platforms. But again, if you do befriend them, well, you're there to watch and observe, not necessarily take part. Now, like I said, there's a few different ways that you can turn to for different advice. Now, the best way to deal with grooming is to prevent it happening and make sure your child is well informed, uses those privacy settings on social networks, and knows that they can talk to you about it if they feel unsafe or worried. So start that dialogue with them early and teach your children how to be safe online. The minimum age is 13 on social networks, but we found out earlier that 11 and 12-year-olds, there's a high percentage of them with a platform. Update the privacy settings on those platforms. And then there are also, if you have any concerns, there's a number of places that you can go to and contact. You've got CEOP there. You've got the Police Safety Centre as part of that. You've got Childline and, of course, IWF, Internet Watch Foundation. Privacy and identity fraud. Now, just like adults, children can be at risk of having their online identity stolen and misused. And it can be difficult to maintain a child's privacy as they might not understand the type of information that is safe to share online and some things like default privacy settings and what's useful for them. So there's a few things that we can start to look out for. So if you suspect that your child's identity has been stolen, have you got a bill for something that you know that you haven't ordered and it's in their name? Potentially, that could be an indicator that the child's identity has been stolen. Are you starting to get emails from an organisation that you don't recognise? Or have you received any letters regarding things like government benefits or tax payments? So it's great for them to build relationships and share their interests, but it's also important that we again open that conversation so they understand what could happen if we give away too much information when we're online. In terms of a few steps for you to follow, how should I protect my child from identity theft? The first step, go to those privacy settings. Check them on the phone, on the tablet, and whether they're set up for location services, sharing of contacts, photos, calendars, Bluetooth sharing, microphone, anything. Have a look at the settings, the privacy settings on the device, and see what they're set up for. Find out what's already out there. Search for your child's full name in several different search engines, different apps, and see what information or photographs that you get publicly. If you find things that you want to remove, take action. Go incognito. Teach your children, if they're on a public computer or public Wi-Fi, do they know how to use incognito browsing? Now, if your child's identity has been stolen, be sure to tell any of those affected websites about the problem and get your child to log in and change all their passwords immediately. So we have just over 10 minutes left together, and this brings us to our second pausing for questions. Do we have any questions there in the chat? I cannot see any at the moment. If you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. We've got 10 more minutes together. Sam is there in the chat. Samantha's ready and waiting for them as well, and she's been sharing some great links for you to share, save and use at a later date, so make sure you do that before you log off today as well. So the final part of today's session, we're going to wrap up with thinking about talking about online safety with our children, because a lot of these 6 key areas that we've covered today is about building a digital resilience in our children. We don't want them to feel overwhelmed by having a responsibility to understand how they use good internet practices. So building this digital resilience in our children doesn't need to be overwhelming for us as a parent, but we do have a responsibility to tackle this. It's interesting because this topic can be very, with different carers and parents, you get quite heated in some of these conversations, and I've overheard conversations where people have said that, good parenting is a key to teaching people our children digital resilience. And I think you can be a really good parent and your children still face some of these risks. So it's about consistency. It's about aiming to always do your best. And it's also about accepting that perfect is impossible. Having a perfect approach to keeping our children safe online is impossible. It's always changing. It's a fast-paced digital world. But there are ways that we can positively have that conversation with our children. We can open that dialogue, and we can continue to build that trust with our children and how they use their devices. So conversation starter tips. Talk early and talk often. Really, really important. It's important not to just bury our heads in the sand when it comes to tech. And I've heard so many parents say, I just don't do social media, or I don't get Snapchat. We wouldn't leave our children to cross a busy road without them knowing to look left, to look right. So it's the same thing. We don't want to just hand them these devices without giving them any form of training. So as parents, as carers, we don't want to miss out on these golden opportunities to keep our children safe and informed by sort of referring or deflecting to this really common phrase, I just don't get it. They're more techie than I am. How can we encourage that conversation? Secondly, we want to choose the right time. And we want to open up and share too. It's a two-way street. So talk about the benefits and the dangers in balance, and maintain that open dialogue, which is step 4, create a safe space. Start to think about how you can make sure that they're not scared to come to you when it comes to facing something they're not quite sure about online. So a 5-point plan that's been put together for parents. First of all, understand the risks, but remember, risks are not necessarily harm. Really important. Secondly, keep the risks in proportion. The UK, for example, where I'm based, is one of the safest places for children to be online. So keep your risks in proportion. 3, communicate regularly and consistency, and that's been a theme throughout the whole of today's session. 4, have a look at some of those tools and the resources that we've given you today, and put in place those helpful tools, those helpful privacy settings, and create a family agreement. Create an agreement that everyone in the family agrees to and sticks to. And 5, as your children grow, start to develop coping strategies to foster that digital resilience. Super, super important. Now, there's a few tools that I've mentioned throughout today's session, but there's also a few additional tools that I'd like to finish with today. So I talked about CE Op there, Link with the Police. We've talked about Family Link, a great tool for you to use to really start to monitor what your children are doing on those devices. We've got Childline, and we've also got the Internet Watch Foundation there as well. And of course, internetmatters.org have so many resources, blogs, videos that you can really engage with to make sure you're on a level and you're keeping on top of all the things that can help you mitigate some of the challenges that you're going to come across. But one that I haven't mentioned yet is a fantastic tool called Be Internet Legends. Now, Be Internet Legends is an educational program that was developed by Google and Parent Zone. And now Parent Zone also have some amazing resources for parents and carers on keeping our children safe. So another place to go for resources there. But it was developed in partnership with Parent Zone, and it aims to empower younger children to use the web safely and wisely so that they can be confident explorers in the online world. Now, it works through, in a gamified way, the 5 pillars. And it talks about being internet sharp, So thinking before they share, good and bad. News travels fast online, so children can sometimes find themselves in tricky situations with lasting consequences. So how can we be sharp? How can we think before we share? The second pillar is to be alert. Check that it's for real. Making sure that people or situations online are exactly what they seem. And Internet Legends starts to work through telling the difference between what's real and what's not real. Secure, be internet secure, protect your stuff. Personal privacy and security are real important when it comes to online as much as they are in the real world. So keeping valuable information safe and helping children avoid damaging their devices, reputations, relationships, anything. The fourth pillar, be internet kind, respect each other. The internet amplifies everything. Good can seem more exciting, bad things can seem a whole lot worse and can hurt a lot. So a great rule to live by online as well as offline is treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. Be internet kind. And the final pillar, be internet brave. When in doubt, discuss. Again, coming back to fostering those conversations. So when our children come across something they're not quite sure about online, we want to make them feel comfortable about talking to their trusted adult. And adults can support this by showing that they're open to talking, even about things that are difficult or embarrassing, maybe things at home or things in the classroom. Now, these 5 pillars are worked through, like I said, in a gamified way. And in a gamified way. And again, there's a link there, g.co/be internet legends /parents. So you can see on the mock-up on the right hand side, Be Internet Legends introduces Interland, which is the adventure-packed online game that makes learning about internet safety fun. So our children are what we call internauts, and they are there to combat badly behaved hackers, phishers, oversharers, and bullies by practicing the skills that they need to be confident online explorers. So it's interactive, it's fun, and you can play it together. It's something that you can do together. So it's a really, really nice platform for you to introduce, especially if you've got younger Key Stage 2 children. You can start to use Interland by Be Internet Legends. Now, to finish, I just want to highlight that Parent Zone and the Be Internet Legend program does have a schools package. So there's loads of resources there for teachers, and they include things like lesson plans, stickers, posters, activities, and they've been developed in partnership with Parent Zone and PSHE Association. Interactive school assemblies. So there are specially trained Be Internet Legends facilitators that will come into the schools and facilitate assemblies all across the UK. So this could be something that you could apply for and look into. And the Interland online game that teaches those safety lessons is available in the school place as well, in the school environment. So you can see that example. We've got our teacher there with the children playing that game as a collective. So you can make it collectively entertaining and educational in the classroom as well. Which brings us to the final couple of minutes. Do we have any questions? I can't see any questions so far. But I'm so happy that we've been able to get through some really important concepts around keeping our family safe online. In terms of your next steps, there are so many resources we've shared today. So your next steps is to make sure you've got all those links from Samantha in the chat and go through some of those tools and resources and find out what's going to be useful for you, what's going to be useful for your family and the children that are in your care. and start to play with some of those tools and implement some of those techniques to combating positively any of the risks that your children are facing online. And that brings us to the end. So we do have a feedback form that we would absolutely love for you to let us know what else we could be doing in this arena that's going to help you more. goo.gov/digital garage feedback. And we do also have a survey that's, if you are a parent or a guardian, we'd absolutely love for you to head to this survey. I'm sure Samantha will put it in the chat for you. And there's a few questions around there about some of the issues you may be facing as a parent or carer. Other than that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I hope you have a lovely Friday and a fantastic weekend. And I look forward to welcoming you to many more Google Digital Garage training sessions in the future. Goodbye.